This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We want to know more, do you? Informed Sources brings our region's top print and broadcast journalists together.
To examine the stories behind the headlines.
And we can all learn more.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, an emerging downriver container terminal known as Port NOLA could be a major economic engine. Currently, however, the site is more of a political battleground, with spiraling cost being among the issues. Cost is a factor, too, in salvaging Plaza Towers, a dilapidated downtown high-rise. Now there is a plan in the works. This is an election weekend with several low-rise municipal referendums, including millage renewals that are of long-term importance, and an Orleans Parish prison funding issue that may have some voters confused. In Jefferson Parish, there is also a tense runoff for a council seat. May is known for bringing flowers. The month also brings memories of floods, including one on May 3rd, 1978, that compelled the area to rethink its drainage system. Joining us to discuss these stories are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Robert Collins, Dillard University political analyst for WVUE, Fox 8, and Verite News, and Tony McCauley, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And we are going to stay with Tony right now because certainly the controversy over the container terminal in St. Bernard that Port NOLA wants to do, it was planning to expand there. The controversy is not really toned down at all. There are those who want it, there are those who do not. And recently there was a legislative hearing on it.
Yes, it's sort of coming to a head now. This has been going on for quite some time. They've been talking about having a downriver container terminal for decades, really, because most shipping these days goes on containers as opposed to the old bulk cargo that you used to have. And New Orleans, the region, has been losing out on that business for quite a while now to Mobile, Alabama, and to Houston and other Gulf ports, because the ships are getting ever larger and they can't make it up to the past the Crescent City connection. Right. So 4 years ago, Port NOLA bought this land, about 1,100 acres down at Violet in St. Bernard Parish, in cooperation with St. Bernard Port. And they plan to put in a big container terminal there downriver from Crescent City connection. But they've been opposed by many of the residents in St. Bernard Parish and pretty much all of the politicians. So it's coming to a head now because one of the things that is absolutely crucial, everyone agrees, is a road that would take the truck traffic. They would have thousands of trucks coming from that terminal every day. So they need a road that would not go onto the two arteries there now, the Judge Perez Drive and the East St. Bernard Highway, which are already congested and meet a lot of blocks when they have to cross rail crossings and all that sort of stuff. So there's a report coming out by the New Orleans Regional Planning Commission. They've moved it to the 14th. It's long overdue. It's supposed to be out last year. And in advance of that, the supporters of the port went to the House Transportation Committee in April, and they were looking to fast track, they were looking for a bill that would allow them to fast track a private partnership, public-private partnership, to be able to build that road as a toll road, to finance it primarily as a private project. It's already gotten $50 million of state money earmarked for it and $15 million of federal monies but it would cost from 400 to 800 million is the estimate to build that road, depending on which option they go for.
Well, let me ask you this: the opposition to it. You say that residents and also political leaders are opposed to this. I mean, why are they so worried about this?
Well, there's lawsuits that they filed which pretty much lay this out. They're mostly worried about what they argue would be the environmental damage of having such a huge facility right there in the midst of their community. There's a lawsuit that also by the school board there. It's been brought by the district attorney in St. Bernard Parish, which basically says the port is illegally trying to take trying to move a school that's sort of right in the area that they want to build the port facility. So you know, they have a bunch of different ways. Basically, they feel it would ruin the way of life down there in the parish.
And so the road that will be the linkage road, this is really crucial for this project to move on if it does move on.
Everyone agrees that. So the people who spoke in opposition to the bill that was just in the House to try to fast track the road, a lot of the politicians, you know, would like to see road and rail improvements in St. Bernard Parish, but they don't want to allow that bill or anything else that would facilitate the port, the terminal. They are vehemently against that. It has to be said that you know, there are people for it. The GNO, the economic development folks, were there speaking in favor of it. The two U.S. senators, Cassidy and Kennedy, have been behind getting federal money for the road part and for the facility itself. But there are other interests. The people who are opposed in the parish are backing a proposal by Plaquemines Port for an alternative West Bank one, which has been talked about for a long time but hasn't really gotten anywhere. But they are arguing now, and they're demanding to know how much the Louisiana International Terminal is what it's called, by the way, how much that would actually cost, because they've talked about it costing $1.8 billion for the last several years. But David Vitter, former Senator David Vitter, who's lobbying for this Plaquemine alternative, and now Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser, who's been opposed to the St. Bernard one, both have come out publicly saying to the Port NOLA, tell us now what is the cost. They think it's twice the estimate that's been around before. They think it's $3.9 billion.
What is the composition of Port NOLA management as opposed to the individual districts along the way, like the individual ports? Like, does Port NOLA supersede the Port of New Orleans, or does the Port of New Orleans still exist to what it was? What is it?
So Port of New Orleans is Port NOLA, and it has its jurisdiction, but I mean, it can, you know, it can do business outside of its specific geographical. You know, the legislation, which is like 100 years old, this came up in the committee meeting, allows them to do business with St. Bernard Port, for example. It allows them to enter into a private deal to build this road, which would go outside of its specific jurisdiction, which would allow them eminent domain as well. So what they were trying to do really was just to fast track powers that they already have to do these kinds of projects. But one other thing I just mentioned, which came up in the committee meeting, which is some members of the committee who they voted not to pass this legislation, to hold it back and have some more discussion on it. They want to know what the Landry administration's position is, because they've been kind of neutral on the West Bank proposal versus the Violet one. And Port NOLA wants the Landry administration also to come out and say, we fully back. You know, obviously they want Landry to say he fully backs the Louisiana International Terminal. But at least to take, the committee members said they want to see what position the Landry administration takes on this, you know.
Okay, and so the report that is long overdue, that should be coming out, what, in the next couple of weeks or something?
It comes out, they just changed the date this morning, actually.
Oh, really?
It's coming out on May 14th.
Okay, we'll be looking for it. Thanks a lot, Tony. Hey, Robert, over to you, because there's a hotly contested council race in Jefferson Parish, election Saturday.
Yes, very interesting council race, Jefferson Parish District 1. Just a quick reminder about how we got here. We had a primary election where we had longtime councilman Ricky Templet, who spent about $388,000, and then we had a Tim Kerner, who is the mayor of Lafitte, a city of about 2,000 people, spent about $175,000, and then we had Andre Emanuel, who's a former school teacher, current businesswoman in Gretna. She spent about $3,000, and that's it. Manuel actually ran first in this race. She ran first, spending almost no money. And Ricky Template, who was the favorite in the race and basically had all the endorsements of all of the majority of the public officials in Jefferson Parish, didn't even make the runoff. He was eliminated. It was a nasty race, a lot of television ads, lawsuits going back and forth. So it was a very, very nasty primary. So the runoff has been much quieter, and so it is between Emanuel and Kerner, and the key to Manuel running first and getting in the runoff is that this particular district is about 36% black, and she actually got 36% of the vote in the primary. So she did a very good job of mobilizing the black vote, securing it, getting it to the polls. Now the challenge is going to be, now that she's in a runoff, is that it's, of course, Kerner's a Republican, so it's a Republican against a Democrat now. It's a white male against a black female. The challenge is going to be this district is about 55% Republican, so it is a majority Republican district. So the question is, can she hold on to her 36% of the vote that she got in the primary, and then find another 15% of the vote somewhere to put her over 50%. It's going to be tough.
Any issues that have surfaced that differentiate the two?
So the main issue is the issue of discretionary funding, which is sort of been controversial in the area. Each council member has a discretionary fund of several $100,000 that they can spend in their district with really very few limitations. The argument in the past, Tim Kerner's argument has been that most of that money with past council members has been spent in Gretna. Gretna is a city of about 17,400 people. It's the largest municipality in the district. And so his argument is that most of the money is spent in Gretna, and so the smaller cities like Lafitte and the unincorporated areas don't really get their fair share of that money for infrastructure. So his argument is that he's going to spread the money around fairly to the other municipalities and make sure everybody gets a fair percentage of infrastructure money based on their population. Now, what Manuel said she's going to do, now she is a resident of Gretna, she disagrees with that approach. She doesn't see any problem. She basically argues the reason why Gretna gets most of the money is that just Gretna has most of the people. It's a city has most of the people. So she said what she's going to do is she's going to set up a committee of citizens. She's going to appoint a committee. She's not going to just arbitrarily make the decision herself. She's going to appoint a committee of citizens to, and so any local officials that have infrastructure needs or economic development needs, they go before the committee, and the committee will evaluate those proposals and make a recommendation to her.
So turnout, real important on this race then?
Yeah, turnout's real important. So I looked at the early vote numbers, both from the primary and for this race. So in the primary, the early vote was about 5,500 people. This time it's about 5,200 people. So it's running really close. So I think since we normally look at the early vote to sort of predict turnout, you could have, it was about 31% in the last election. You could have very close to that, which would be a high turnout for a council race where no other, where there are no chief executives, no parish presidents, no governor's race on the ballot. That would be a good turnout.
Okay.
Well, you said she has to look for 15% of the vote. The place you look would be from the template vote. How's that? Has he taken a stand on it? Or
He has not. He has not endorsed. I mean, I thought that her original strategy would have been to go to template and ask for his endorsement, because there's so much nastiness and animosity between Kerner and template. I can't imagine him endorsing template, but it appears, I'm sure she probably did try and get it, but he has chosen to stay out of the race, and I imagine it's because it's a Republican district and he's a Republican, and he probably doesn't want to endorse a Democrat.
And there's some other issues on the ballot too, and we're going to be talking about that in just a minute with you. But now we're going to go over to E, because it is the month of May, and we remember May Some of us do, certainly, for a serious flood that happened in 1978.
Yeah, it was May 3rd, 1978. And just to set it up, the was significant what happened the day before. The day before, May 2nd, 1978, was the inauguration day for Dutch Morial. It was his first term, first black mayor. It was a big deal. It was also because there was more interest in solar power. It was also declared nationally by the solar power people to be Sunday, S-U-N-D-A-Y. So I remember there was signs all over about Sunday and Dutch Morial being inaugurated and all the great things that could be happening in New Orleans. The next day was a flood, it was a deluge.
Yeah, it was anything but a Sunday.
Yeah,
It was dark skies.
And you know, part of that, when people talked about floods, they were thinking about floods in terms of waterways overflowing. This was like an urban flood. I mean, and this was like new to the language. This was like from heavy rains, and the drainage systems just couldn't keep up with it. And it overflowed. There was like 10 inches of rain. I remember part of the discussion is people pointing out that many things have happened over the years that have changed in the saturation of the water into the ground. One example being the Superdome. The Superdome had opened in 1975. And so think of all the land that the Superdome is on, all that space, which in the past would have been different buildings, but you've had like natural drainage areas, and you didn't have that, you know, none of that drain. And so people really began to thinking about the pumping system and how out of the pumps. And so ultimately, over the next few years, there was just a huge effort to redo some of the drainage areas. Remember the big project on Napoleon Avenue, which lasted for almost for years. I remember somebody told me that part of the system in Napoleon Avenue you could drive a truck through now because it was so big. And so it really did affect the thinking of what happened. Curiously, so that was May 3rd, 1978. That was Dutch Morial's first full day in office. All right. Later that year, there was talk about, as Mardi Gras approached, there was talk about the police strike, which was going to happen in February of '79. And somebody I knew Governor Edwards was a new governor and happened to be in governor's office around that time. And he got a phone call from Dutch Morial, and he overheard Edwards saying, "Dutch, ever since you've been mayor, it's been one problem after the other. First you got the flood, now you got a strike. I mean, can't you straight thing?" And then he was teasing him. Oh, okay. But yeah, it was a rough start. There would be another flood in May of '79, and this one was a little bit broader. It was across southeast Louisiana and into Mississippi, but it was the same sort of thing. It was the same heavy rain kind of thing. And so as these things developed, you started seeing, you know, more talk about we need to do something different.
Drainage. There was another one in '95 too in May.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the one. Yeah. That was May 9, 1995. And so that really sent a message. And there's certainly been more of an awareness. I mean, people knew New Orleans was below flood level, but there was never as much talk about the floods and the pumping capacity, but that really changed things.
Yeah, well, it was the metro area too. I mean, I know Jefferson Parish also had to tackle with some drainage issues, as they still do. That '95 flood was one to contend with as well. So sometimes it rains heavy here. You know, we just pray that we don't get a repeat.
But not as much as in May, apparently, because I mean, if you look at the charts, yeah. By the way, if anybody does a search on the internet, that there's several YouTube videos from that day, mostly from the TV stations, and you can get a good idea of the flooding.
I remember we were on the air for a long time, and people losing their cars. So many cars went underwater, and I just remember pirogues too. People in pirogues, you know, paddling down Napoleon Avenue and other streets. So, okay, Eve, thanks a lot. All righty, let's go on over now to Tony, because there is also now, we're hearing of another attempt to do something with Plaza Towers. What would it be?
Yeah, this is another one of these long-running issues that it's just over your shoulder there. Looms large in the cityscape, and it's been empty since 2002. It's had all kinds of problems. Its problems really date back to when it was first built in the mid-'60s. Ran out of money, and it's had a lot of trouble kind of finding you know, a kind of stable tenant base. And it had to get remediated. It had to get asbestos taken out and other things fixed after it was abandoned. But various developers, various owners have tried to find a new purpose for it, and it's just been an eyesore there for a very long time. And in January, the city finally said to the owners, who's basically the people who run the trusts that were left by the late Joe Yeager, who died last summer, they said, you know, this is a hazard. Stuff keeps falling off it, and they have to close the roads and all that. So a court, they got a court decision allowing them to come up with a demolition plan if something wasn't found for it, some purpose for it. So now what I discovered the other day was that the owner has a tentative deal with a California affordable housing group to turn the tower into a elderly residence, a residence for elderly people who qualify for affordable rents. So the city is backing that, and the owner hopes that they can get a deal on it. What's interesting about this particular, there's been a lot of plans that have come and gone, but what's interesting about this particular one is that the group, Lincoln Avenue Communities, they're called, have actually just finished a project on Tivoli Square, a large affordable housing project for elderly residents. They are partnering with the people who are converting the former naval base in Bywater, which also was a Joe Yeager project, to build 165 affordable units over there. So they've shown form here in the city, and they've got many of these nationally. So there's a hope that they're legit and that they can get this done. However, there is, I think you're about to ask me.
How real is this? What is the reality of this? Will it really happen?
It's got a lot of backing. What it requires, like the one in the Bywater, is a complicated series of subsidies from federal, state, local. So that took. They finally put the pieces together on the naval base, the former naval station, a month ago, and that took years to put that together. So putting those pieces together for this is going to take time. And then the other question, which I feel I really should say, it's a high rise for elderly people. Which anybody who's lived in New Orleans, that's probably the first thing that pops into their mind is, wow, that would be quite an evacuation if it came to that power outage.
With power outage,
Yeah, and we're talking before that demolition is a very difficult. It's hard to demolish a high rise. Whereas the port of embarkation is maybe like a 6 or 7 story building, okay? But to demolish a high rise, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah, this is not like the Lake Charles building where they just blew it up basically and it fell down. This is in the middle of the city. You can't do that, and also the structure wouldn't allow them to do that. So this would be, it costs low millions to do a demolition, a blow up. This would have to be taken down by cranes bit by bit. It would cost. They estimate the initial estimates were about $30 million, which would probably fall on taxpayers. So.
How many stories?
45.
45, yeah. So it is a high rise. All right, we'll see where it goes. Thanks a lot, Tony. Okay, let's wrap up with you, Robert, because there are other issues on the ballot. Millage renewals.
Yeah, so we have a series of tax millages both in Orleans Parish and in Jefferson Parish. The first one is a 10-year renewal of a 2.46 mills tax for the sheriff's office. Now this has been very confusing to a lot of people because some of the opponents to this millage have been putting up signs on neutral grounds saying no new taxes, vote against the sheriff's millage. We don't want our taxes raised anymore. But the truth is, this is not a new tax. This is a renewal of a current tax. So voting yes on this millage will not raise anyone's taxes. This is a 10-year renewal of a current tax. And the sheriff has said that if this renewal does not pass, she will actually have to lay off deputies. She will not be able to maintain her current capacity at the jail. Prisoners might have to be sent somewhere else. So people just need to understand this is not a new tax. This is just a renewal. Okay. Also in Orleans Parish, we have a $220 parcel fee for Lake Vista Crime District. That is not a citywide fee. That will only be paid for by the residents that live in the Lake District, in the Lake Vista Crime District. Then in Jefferson Parish, we have 3 tax issues. We have renewal on the library millage for 10 years. Again, no new taxes. We have a drainage renewal for Drainage District 2, and we have another renewal for a consolidated recreation, community center, and playground district for 10 years. These are not new taxes. They will not raise anyone's taxes. They are renewals.
Usually renewals are a lot easier to pass because it's not a new tax. But I know that there's a lot of concern among organizers and all this that the voters are kind of hostile with the thing nationally. They're confusing this with tariffs and political leaders taxing them.
And even and we've seen in past elections, for example, in St. Tammany Parish, they've shot down renewals over in St. Tammany Parish. So people are very hostile to any sort of tax procedures right now. So I think the thing for people to understand right now, these renewals, they will not raise your taxes. And if you use these services, for example, if you're a resident of Jefferson Parish and you check out books from the library, or your children check out books from the library, you need to understand, you need to express an opinion on this millage that funds the library.
Right,
so
in Jefferson
you need to
Parish,
take a position.
the millages run out. They expire in, what, 1 or 2 or 3 years. So they're giving themselves some pad here. It goes down this time, they can come back and
Sure. So they're putting some insurance in there that if they didn't communicate it effectively this time, they can bring it back up next year.
So if it's not renewed, then will people be paying less taxes? Is that the end result for the residents?
Yes.
Yeah,
People's taxes will. So on your property tax bill, you would know.
But you'd have a decrease in services, though.
Exactly.
If you did that.
Exactly. Yeah. And in some cases, it's severe. And like the sheriff argues basically, literally she would have to lay off deputies and she could not handle the current prisoner capacity at the jail. And in the case of the library literally could have to shut down branches. I mean, I imagine the main branch would stay open, but if you have a neighborhood branch of the Jefferson Parish Library, if this renewal isn't passed, your neighborhood branch might shut down.
Yeah. But it's a tough time right now, too. Everybody's worried about tariffs and what it's going to cost them, so it's not the best environment. But it is a renewal.
It is
Emphasize
a renewal.
that. All right.
No one's taxes will go up.
Other stories, E.
Okay, tomorrow is the Kentucky Derby, and usually Kentucky Derby, well, always the winner of the Louisiana Derby is one of the horses in it. Never wins. Okay, Louisiana Derby never wins, but anyway, that'll probably be the case this week too, because the horse that won the Louisiana Derby was named Tiztastic, and it's running into 20-1 odds against winning. Okay, but for us at this table, we might be aware that the favorite by a long shot is named Journalism.
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
Journalism is 3-1.
We like that name.
So there's a possibility that there'll be a big win for journalism
There's
tomorrow.
always a go journalism.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and there's another horse called Publisher. Why, I don't know. But anyway, root for journalism.
Yeah, right. Robert, over to you.
So the current war that's been going on between the city council and the mayor over trash contracts is about to spill into the next mayor's race, because the supporters of Troy Henry are about to start accusing the people trying to stop him from getting the contract as being supporters of Helena Moreno, and they're going to accuse her of they're accusing the Helena Moreno people of trying to block them from the contracts because Troy Henry is a supporter of Oliver Thomas. So look for that war to get even nastier.
All right, over to you, Tony.
Kentucky Derby. So if you want a patriotic Louisiana bet, Brian Hernandez rode last year's winner. He's from Lafayette, has a house in New Orleans. He's riding something called Burnham, what's it called? Burnham something. Look it up. Burnham Park? No, Burnham Square. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And that's a 12-1 shot. So that's my pick.
Okay, very good. We'll see if you're right. All righty. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
From Masterpiece to Nova, Antiques Roadshow to Agatha Christie,
And of course, stepping out and informed sources.
we are pleased to support public television
It's been our passion.
for a lifetime.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.